Good evening. We would like to introduce you to Councillor Bert Abrams, Warden of Broad Plain House. Bert has recently returned from a 3-week working holiday in the Seychelles. Good evening, Bert.
Good evening, Enid.
First, would you tell us exactly where the Seychelles is and how you got there?
To get to Seychelles, you fly to Nairobi and then take another plane which takes you 1,500 miles out in the Indian Ocean from Mombasa. It's a 4 days boat ride, but you can get there in 3.5 hours by plane.
And which way did you travel, Bert?
Via Nairobi. I spent 3 days in Nairobi visiting treetops, where, if you remember, the Queen was when her father died.
Yes.
Looking at the wildlife there, and it was a very fascinating, marvellous experience to see the wildlife in Kenya.
So it's quite a way away.
Well, it's a long way away,
Yeah.
yes.
What were your first impressions of the island, as regards scenery, climate, etc.?
Well, during the whole time I was there, the temperature never dropped below 84. It was up near 90 the whole of the time. My first impression upon flying in was to see thousands of turtles around the island. They're not allowed to fish for turtles now, so the turtles are having a marvellous time there. At least the English can't fish for them, the Japanese do.
But they breed like mad, do they?
Yes, there's plenty of turtles there. The island itself is a most beautiful island, and I should think it's the nearest that I should get to heaven on this earth.
Lovely. Yeah. And where did you stay, Bert? What sort of accommodation is offered to the tourist over there?
Well, since they've had the airport in, 3 large hotels have been put up there. But I did not stay in one of these hotels. I was lucky enough to stay in the oldest house on the island, where Somerset Maugham lived for 20 years and wrote many of his books. It was a most beautiful place. Whether it was the same lizards running over the ceiling at night, I don't know, but it was just out of this world.
And would you tell us how the newly married natives there start their married life?
Well, if they decide to get married, then of course they get married. They do it properly because it's a Catholic island, but they build little houses out in the jungle, and they live there. They're fortunate because in this country, if you don't work, if you have no money, you starve. Well, out there you wouldn't starve because there are millions of bananas rotting, coconuts everywhere, mangoes, breadfruit. There's no shortage of food, and one only has to throw a line in the water and you've got a tuna on the end.
Oh, lovely.
So fish is one of their stable diets there.
The natives of the Seychelles, how do they work and make their living and play within the island?
Well, there isn't all that much work there. In fact, a boy or girl, those that do go to school, it's not compulsory. They leave at 14, but very seldom do they get a job before they're 17. And it's either in some of the Chinese shops, though a little building is going on there now. They seem to be quite happy and very contented. They don't seem to worry very, very much whether they're at work or no. Certain industries are being brought into the island, but they do very well without that.
Yeah. And you met some quite famous celebrities while you were there, I understand.
Yes, in the first week I was there, Yul Brynner was also staying in the same house. And in the last week, Pete Sellers was there, so that we had quite a lot of conversation late at night. There were only 11 in this very, very small house, right on the beach. And from my bedroom, it looked down upon one of the loveliest beaches imaginable, surrounded by coconut palms, which was floodlit at night. And the water was so warm you could bathe at any time.
Very
That's
nice.
right.
And you were talking about Somerset Maugham's house just now, and I think we have a picture of it. And do they, are they proud that Somerset Maugham lived there in their island?
I think it's taken as for granted. See, Bishop Macarius of Greece also was marooned there for a time, or exiled there. But it's such a beautiful place that I think anyone who had the opportunity would want to go there to live.
And you brought along some coral to show us, didn't you, Bert? It's quite beautiful. I don't know if we can...
The coral is alive. And whether this can ever be brought out, but you can see the tremendous intricate working of this piece of coral. you're not allowed to pick it, but what's washed ashore you can have.
Yeah,
It's
that's
the tracery and the work inside of that is
it's
absolutely
really
magnificent.
beautiful, isn't it? Yeah.
But
yeah.
whether the camera can show this, I don't know.
Yeah. And this is always my favourite. This is, to me, is the real coral, the reef sort
Yes,
of
there
coral,
are
isn't it?
many
Yeah.
different kinds of coral there. And of course they do produce a coral reef out which often prevents sharks and other fish from coming inshore. But again, the shores were full of shells like this. Although the big conch shells, now it's illegal to take them. Directly travellers began to go in, they started taking away these large conch shells, which meant nothing to the Seychelles, but meant a lot to people who took them back to this country and sold them because they're beautiful coloured, magnificent. And also there's quite a lot of mother of pearl. You break it open and it's just in layers, this mother of pearl. It's very, very beautiful indeed.
And as regards as a tourist, what sort of gifts would you say was a good buy if we happened ever to go there?
Well, there's absolutely nothing to spend your money on in the Seychelles. A German has just opened up a brewery there. I met him and he was a very nice fellow indeed. As a matter of fact, I went to the Rotary there in the Rotary Club and met him. But they have no native art of any kind whatsoever. They've never been trained and never been taught to make anything. So you go over there, all you can spend your money on is food, and my gosh, there's some marvellous food there, and drink.
Would you say that the tourism trade have affected their way of living yet?
Not yet. It's an island without television, without transistors. The news comes out in Creole and English and French 2 or 3 times a day. You see, everyone's in bed by 9 o'clock at night. There's no need to stay up.
No.
But the sun is scorching at 6 o'clock in the morning. It's dark all the year round at 6, so there's no evening life of any kind whatsoever, except in the new hotels.
And do you find that the average tourist over there are what nationality?
They were from South Africa and Australia. Very, very few British.
How about the Americans? Have they invaded
No,
it yet?
there were some American hippies who arrived, and they were put back on the next plane. And now they've got a notice up, no camping allowed on the island.
And what was your diet while you were over there? What did you make the most of?
Well, it was very English. The mornings was bacon and egg, but you always had mangoes, also grapefruit, or and the bacon was killed on the premises. There's plenty of steak there. There's no doubt. There's no shortage of steak on the island. There were a lot of fresh fish. Quite a lot of fish that I'd never heard of. But on the whole, I think the menus are very similar to we have in this country.
You've travelled to many parts of the world, Bert, as part of your job as a youth leader in a warden. You've been to the West Indies, China, Morocco, America, most of the continent. Which country impressed you most, and where else would you still like to go?
Well, in the early days, I always wanted to go back to Morocco because I found Marrakesh, such a marvellous place. But after going to China, I made up my mind China was the nicest place in the world one could ever go to. But I've thrown China overboard now, and I would like to end my days, if ever possible, in the Seychelles. It's so marvellous.
So marvellous.
To be away from television, to be away from civilization, and to be really civilized.
And do the natives, do they like people going to their island?
They were very shy, but I found in the first place they thought I was a bishop because of my beard, and they avoided it a bit the first 2 or 3 days. And the second week, someone got the rumour around the island that I was Colonel Saunders of the finger-licking chicken. So that I was people following me around to see if I was going to sell chicken. But they were very nice, and the youngsters were, once you got to know them, I visited the hospitals, the prisons, the adolescent centres, nearly all the schools, and I was tremendously impressed with the infant schools, and I think they were in many ways in advance of ours. I walked around the classes and spoke to many of these children in the 5s and 6s, and they could all read English very well indeed, which is more than some of our kids can do over here. And I picked them out ad lib. They weren't picked out for me. I had the right to do as I liked. I was very well received. Jim Mancham, the Prime Minister, put on a dinner for me before we came back. But I think I followed the Lord Mayor of London, who was there before I got there, and they thought that I was equal to the Lord Mayor of London. I had that kind of treatment.
Well, thank you for coming along tonight, Bert, and giving us your impressions of the Seychelles. And I hope you do retire there one day.
Thank you very much indeed. My wife will have a say in that, I expect.
Good night.
Thank you. Good night.